I was excited at the idea of learning, and that you are considering how organizations learn, how communities learn. I believe that each person is himself, herself, an organization who has the possibility, the capability, the privilege, and the responsibility to learn. Each person is herself a community because she is made up of so many elements which have gone in to create her, to create him. I am fascinated by learning because I suppose that there was a possibility, it seemed, early on that I would never learn. I was sent from California to a small village in Arkansas, smaller than your meeting room, when I was 3. I stayed with my paternal grandmother and her other son until I was about 7. She taught me to read and write, and my uncle taught me to do my times tables so that I could be of use in the store. My grandmother owned the only black-owned store in the town. At about 7, I was sent from that cozy, snug harbor to St. Louis, to my maternal family. They were highly educated, erudite, way up north in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm sorry to say, my mother's boyfriend raped me when I was about 7, nearly 7.5. When I told the name of the rapist to my family, the man was put in jail. He was kept in jail one night and released. And 3 days later, my brother and I were on the floor of my maternal grandmother's living room. We were playing a game we called Monopoly because we'd never heard it pronounced, when the police came in and informed my maternal grandmother that the man had been found dead. And it seemed they added this gratuitously. It seemed he had been kicked to death. The statement utterly traumatized me. I suddenly thought that my voice had killed the man. So I stopped speaking. I thought if I spoke, my voice might just randomly go out and kill people. Somebody walking on the street, a baby in a carriage, a man in brown shoes. So the best thing to do was not to speak. The family in St. Louis were horrified at my mutism. They did everything they could to woo me away from being mute. But I would not give. After about 3 or 4 months, I'm sure they were weary of the presence of a silent, sullen child whose very being reminded them of this heinous crime. And fortunately for me, they sent me back to my paternal grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. Mama was semi-literate. It's true she was very smart, but she had learned by life. I mean, life had been her teacher. And her own mother had been a slave. Her own mother had 5 daughters, and she named her daughters Anna, Emma, Ida, Ola, and Eula. She had heard of the vowels, and she named her daughters. And she went to work in a white Methodist church so she could get some education for her daughters. My grandmother, who had no idea at all, not formally, of the power of psychological therapy, said to me when I returned home, "Sister, Mama don't care these people send you home thinking you're an idiot or you're a moron. Sister, Mama don't care. Mama know when you and the good Lord get ready, you're going to be a preacher or a teacher." I used to think, poor ignorant Mama. How can anybody be this ignorant? I will never speak. However, somehow her love and acceptance allowed me to think of myself, my whole body, as an ear. I thought I could take this ear body into a room and absorb sound. And whether I understood what was said or not, I could absorb sound. And there I became, by 8 years old, an organization of learning. That belief that I could absorb sound has served me very well. After 6 years, I returned to my voice. Fortunately, my voice hadn't left me. I had left it. The gift of poetry helped me so much, more than anything else, more than anything but Mama's love, my grandmother's love. I began to read poetry at about 8, and I listened to the preacher. I loved to listen to the black Southern preacher. I still do. I mean, to prove it, I belong to 3 churches. But I knew that that was poetry, what I was listening to. When the preacher would say, "And brothers and sisters, I stopped round here to tell you one thing from God's own heart." But I knew that was poetry. And I began to memorize poetry. So I memorized Paul Laurence Dunbar, James Weldon Johnson, Count T. Cullen, Langston Hughes, Georgia Douglas Johnson. I memorized Edgar Allan Poe. I loved Poe so much, I called him Eep to myself in my private times. And although I'd never heard Poe recited, I could recite the poetry in my head without knowing how it would sound, so that whether it was Annabel Lee with that lovely lilting sound, which I thought of like the shore, an ocean shore. I had not seen an ocean shore, mind you, but I had read about an ocean shore. So Annabel Lee seemed to me to be, oh, the tide going in and out graciously. And the raven, oh, the raven, because of the internal rhyme I could see in my mind, I recited the raven like this. Once upon a midnight dreary, as I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, as I nodded almost napping, suddenly I heard a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. Merely 'tis some visitor, I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Merely this, and nothing more. I had it. I memorized the entire thing. At almost 13, I returned to my voice. In the interim, I had allowed myself the grace to learn. I believe that a human being or an organization or a community must give itself permission to learn. There is a statement which was made by Terence And the statement is, Homo sum, humani nihil ame alienum puto. I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. The statement is so profound. If one ingests just a portion of that statement, one is liberated to learn everything. Anything any human being knows is in my capability because I am a human being, and nothing human can be alien to me. It is interesting when you look at Terence in the encyclopedia, Terence with one R, you will see beside his name, in italics, Terentius Afer. He was an African, a slave. He was sold to a Roman senator. The senator freed him. He became the most popular playwright in Rome. 6 of his plays, and that one statement, have come down to us from 154 BC. This man, not born white or free, or with any chance, despite his popularity, of ever becoming even a citizen in the Rome of his time, said, I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. It is so magnificently liberating. Of course, like all liberation, there is the concomitant responsibility. So it means that if one sees the most heinous crime committed by a human being, you can never say, oh, I couldn't do that. No. You have to say, I have within myself all the properties that he or she has within herself, within himself. I intend to use my energies constructively as opposed to destructively. If you can do that, it means then that if a human being dreams a great dream, dares to imagine being of use to the species, if a human being dares to love someone and has the unmitigated gall to accept love in return, it means that you can do it. It means that all information is there not just as static, cold information, not just as data, but to be of use, to make life a little better for someone. Over the years, with the history, which would seem on the face of it to be horrible history. Some San Franciscan, a market person who's quite famous out there, came up with the idea that if you get stuck with a lemon, make lemonade. It's quite a wonderful idea. I know that it's tiresome to be told to pull oneself up by one's own bootstraps. I understand that. And I think it's cruel to do so. However, at some point, one does have to become in league with one's own self, one's own life, one's own short, brief time on this earth. Thomas Wolfe called human beings moths of time and dupes of brevity. In this short time, one should be in league with oneself so that one can be of use and also have some laughs. I never trust people who don't laugh. I mean, I'd like to ask you a question, but I wouldn't be able to hear your answer. So the truth is, people who act as if they put airplane glue on the backs of their hands and stuck them to their foreheads and walk around saying, I'm serious. I don't think they're really serious. I don't think they came to stay. I don't think they came to make a difference, to be of use. I also question people who don't care for themselves. There's an African statement which is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt. So I like to think that in this brief time that I have and that you have, that we can really, as the poet says, and I know it's almost a cliche, leave footprints on the sands of time. I will remind you of this, however. While I say it's a cliche, I realize that cliches continue to exist only because they continue to contain human wisdom. So the early bird still does catch the worm. I mean, it may be boring to hear it said that way, but that is true. And birds of a feather quite often do flock together. So over the years with my history, I have been able to learn a number of languages. At one point in Yugoslavia, I became translator of Serbo-Croat. I teach in French and Spanish, and I'm able to mumble around in Arabic and Fanti and Twi. But to continue, go back away from myself in a way, and more focused on the idea of learning and what to learn. There's a difference, you know, between facts and the truth. Facts can stand in the way of the truth. You can learn so many facts that you never get to the truth. The places where, the times when, the people who, the methods how, but never really the human truth. How did it move me? To whom am I related? How seriously should I be considered as a helpful person? I studied Serbo-Croat in Paris from a Yugoslav woman who taught me Serbo-Croat through French. Now, I don't know how I sounded, because in any case, I am a Southern black lady, so I have my own rhythm and way of being in this world. I learned her Serbo-Croat through her French. And I arrived in Yugoslavia. I was a part of Porgy and Bess, the opera. I was invited out by a couple who were about my age. I was about 24 or 5. And I said yes. Although the American State Department supported, underwrote Porgy and Bess, we were told by the American State Department that we were confined in 4 square block radius of the hotel and 4 square blocks of the theater. Now the reason, I mean, this was during the time when Yugoslavia was still behind the Iron Curtain. But I thought if I had $1 million, I would never go to Yugoslavia. So while I was there and I was invited out, I would go. There was also they couldn't fire me quite because there weren't that many dancers who could sing, black singers who could dance, walking around the streets of Yugoslavia. So I went. The pickup truck stopped by the theater and picked me up. There were about 30 people jammed, standing up in the back of the pickup truck. They hauled me on, and they were singing Yugoslav songs, Serbo-Croat songs, and they had a bottle of Slivovitz, and I drank, and we sang. And then the truck drove out of Belgrade. And I started getting a little nervous. I thought, have I gone too far? The truck drove in the country, way in the bush, and suddenly we pulled up in front of a house that looked like a Charles Adams house with turrets and griffins and wings, and it was, my heart was beating so. I thought, Lord, please don't leave me now. We walked into the house, and there on the record player, there was playing Billie Holiday. Mean to me, why must you be mean to me? Well, that kind of settled me a bit. We had food and drink, and we spoke, mostly French, I suppose, because my Serbo-Croat was pretty primitive. And then out of a corner of a room came a little old woman. She may have been about 4'10" or 9, tiny, and she had osteoporosis. And she had on a flannel robe and homemade flannel slippers, the same kind that my grandmother used to make for herself. And she came out and she looked at the people and she talked, and everyone knew her and they were making over her. And suddenly she looked in the corner where I was sitting and she screamed. She was terrified. My hosts were so embarrassed. They came, they tried to talk to her. They apologized to me. They said, she's ignorant. Please forgive her. I said, no, please, I understand. If I had lived 90 years among my people and never saw a white person and saw one in my 90th year, I would scream. I understand. So I started talking to her in Serbo-Croat. I said, good evening, Mother. I'm very happy to be in your home, Mother. You have a beautiful home. Your children are very nice, Mother. The food is very good. Mother, I like the music. She started coming close to me, little by little, and I kept my voice. I tell you, I know that my Serbo-Croat was primitive, but it conveyed my intent. And she came close to me, and closer, and finally she came close enough, and it didn't come off. And then she touched my hair. She sat down beside me. She said, bring food. Her children, her great-grandchildren, said, she's eaten. I said, no, bring food. So I took a bite. I chewed. She watched me. She said, bring drink. Now, Slivovitz, properly drunk, should be preceded by a tiny spoon of apricot preserves, then the Slivovitz, then another little spoon. And I did it properly. She patted my cheek and said, good girl. It was amazing. I was reminded again of I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. I sat there, my hosts were so happy that I hadn't been angry or hurt, and they made over me. After about 15 minutes, the door opened, the same door she had exited into, opened, and an old man came out, older than she, and even more bent over. And when he didn't look straight at me, I knew she was playing a trick. So he came out, and he was talking to the people and making over them, and then he looked and saw me, and he screamed, and she said, don't be stupid. That's a nice girl. He came to me. I did the same thing. Father, thank you for letting me come into your home. Father, you have a nice home, etc. When he sat down beside me, he asked me, who is your grandfather? Now picture, I was 6 foot tall, black, on the outskirts of Belgrade, Yugoslavia. And this old man in his 90s asked me about my grandfather. So I said, my grandfather's name was Thomas Bailey Johnson. He said, Thomas Bailey Johnson, Thomas Bailey Johnson, Thomas. He asked, who was his father? I said, William Bailey Johnson. He said, William Bailey Johnson. I'm William Bailey Johnson. I know him. He said he was a farmer on the other side of the mountain. He wasn't as good as his father was, but he's very nice. And you are a good girl. Human beings are more alike than we are unalike. It is very important to have that as a basis, I think, for learning. If we know that, really know that, then we are able to take the wisdom of Confucius, the wit of Langston Hughes, the profundity of Martin Buber, the wry and biting intelligence of Edna St. Vincent Millay. We can take the eloquence of Shakespeare and the persistence of Amiri Baraka. It all belongs to all of us, all the time. I think that if we narrow ourselves down, we close off learning, and we close off the possibility of being of use, real use in the universe. I know that a number of people are concerned all the time with the bottom line. The true bottom line is you won't be here that long. That's the true bottom line. We are given about that much time. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we used our energies for the benefit of our species and of our planet? It is a sad thing to amass so much material that we become exiled to things. So my encouragement is to try to keep our learning facilities absolutely open so that we can say we live with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. I want to read one poem. It's a poem which is identified with me quite a lot. It's called And Still I Rise. I wrote the poem for all of us, all of us. There's something so unimaginably exciting about the human being. Each one, each of you has gone to bed one night or another with fear or disappointment or loss or grief, discontent, pain, and yet each one of us has awakened, arisen, seen another human being and said, "Morning, how are you?" "Fine, thanks, and you?" Now that's amazing. Wherever that abides in the human being, there is the nobleness of the human spirit. Despite it all, we rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like suns and like moons, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries, Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard, just 'cause I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bury in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, naturally, I rise. Ladies and gentlemen at Pegasus, I tell you again, I'd love to be there. And I hope you'll invite me again. I would like to remind you, since life is our most precious gift, and since as far as we can be absolutely certain, it's given to us to live but once, let us so live we will not regret years of useless virtue, inertia, timidity, and ignorance. And in dying, each of us can say, all my conscious life and energies have been dedicated to the most noble cause in the world, the liberation of the human mind and spirit. Through learning, let it begin with me. Thank you. Have a wonderful conference. Thank you.
Wow.
Okay.
That was great.
Thank you. Ooh.
Woohoo! Standing ovation.